V'hinei kol zehu mitzad ha'adam mekayim Torah mitzvahs k'deboy. The Rebbe said in the last paragraph, he spoke about an experience that's brought in Kabbalah and Chassidus, which is called Leishtava Begufa de Malka, to be incorporated in the body of the king. It's a very Kabbalistic idea and Hasidic idea with a lot of Kabbalah, so I'll just make it brief. There is the manifestations of the king. There are emanations, manifestations, experiences, and then there is to be in the body of the king. Let me give you a simple example. It's a medrash. The medrash says, I've said it before, but I don't know if Yaakov was then learning with us, I'll say it again. The medrash says, there was a king, and he came to the people, and the first people to be around him are like, Lahavdil by Trump, the Minister of Education and Health and Transportation. And everyone's jockeying for a position, of course, to get more funds for their department. Now the king says it's time to go back, and he starts walking back to his palace. The Medrash says that there were duchsesin and another word, I forget the word, which means deputies, all kinds of deputies, ministers, like I just described. And as they start walking back, there is a room in the royal palace that has tremendous art, beautiful Rembrandts and Picassos and bronze. When he gets on, you'll tell him I mentioned his name. Anyway, and Chagall's, and you go in there, it's better than the Met in Manhattan. And some of them get fascinated, and they get stuck. And they never come out of the room as the king progresses walking towards his chamber. As we go further, so we've lost already some to the art. They're enamored by the art, and they're not coming out of the room of the art. The next room they pass is gold and silver and copper and all kinds of expense. Okay, and they go there, and they look at all this money and coins and from different countries, and they're fascinated with it. And guess what? They get stuck there. As the king approaches his Yechidus room, his royal room, only one fellow is left, and the Medrash calls this fellow Pikach or Pikeach, a shrewd individual. He was not moved and did not get stuck by the art and the wealth. And he went following the king. In other words, if the king would have made a U-turn and gone, excuse the expression, to the bathroom, he would have been standing outside the bathroom waiting for the king. Why? Because he knew that his objective is to be with the king. This, I could say, is a mashal for this concept brought in Kabbalah and Chassidus, Leishtava Begufa de Malka. Leishtava means to be lihikalel, to be included, incorporated. Begufa, in the guf, in the body, the Malka of the king. To be with the king, not with a fascination of the king. And for that, you have to be pikach. You got to be shrewd and smart. Because in life, it's this way too. Let's say even Yom Kippur, yesterday, what did we ask Hashem for? No, there's parnasa, and there's health, and there's shidduchim. No, of course, everyone needs all those things. The question is, what was your mevukesh? Is it to be with the Melech? And we learned about this in preparation for Yom Kippur, that the tshuva of Yom Kippur is a neshama tshuva. So I was asking the Chevra in Shul, and they looked at me dumbfounded. Like I asked them, what does it mean, a tshuva, a neshama tshuva? I asked someone who was a big Talmud Chacham, and he just looked, and Nigla Chassidus, what does it mean? This is what it means, in simple words. I mean, there's the Kabbalah words, the Chassidus word, but in simple words, you know what it means? It means the perspective of the neshama is to be with Hashem. And everything you do, you ask yourself, is this what Hashem wants? Is this the godly experience? If you cannot say definitely that this is the neshama experience, God's experience, it's fine. But it's just like getting stuck in the room of the art and the wealth with the fascinations. And guess what? You never make it to the king. So, if you're plugged in and you have a big account of mitzvahs that outweigh your averos and all that, okay, you'll get more schar. And if you don't, you got problems, you got issues. You got to find more schar. You got to work harder. But if you're with the king is going to take you for a ride wherever he goes, including if you have problems and issues. You're with the king. You understand? That's what it means, a tshuva of the neshama. The neshama doesn't look for a fascination. The neshama looks for the essence. This is what we learned in a nutshell in the last chapter where he talks about the malachim and the neshamas and all kinds of levels. Is this clear? Rabbi Isai, Yaakov, do you follow? Okay, good. If not, yeah.
Where's the mashal from?
The mashal is from the Medrash. The Rebbe, in the Maamar that he said on his birthday, 1971, brings that mashal. The Maamar starts with the pasuk Bayom Ashtei Osar Yom, right? We say every day of Nisan, we say the Nesiim. So the Rebbe said a Maamar on the verse Bayom Ashtei Osar Yom, and in that Maamar it brings the mashal, and then he edited. It's a fascinating Maamar. If you haven't learned it, I urge you to, and it might even be in English as well. And maybe one day we'll learn it. Let's go further. 39. Now, this is what we learned, and what I just said is when you do mitzvahs basically properly. Also, now you day ha mitzvahs, through doing the mitzvahs, hine maila nafshay, one's soul is elevated, exalted, lishtava begufa, to be incorporated in the guf, in the body of the king. But someone who sinned, and he made a pegia, he touched Hashem in a way that's no good, and he desecrated the path that Hashem wants us to go on. As we all know very well, the blemish that we make, tzarich lasos tshuva. You got to do tshuva. Without doing tshuva, then you could jump up and down, backwards and forwards. You have to begin by doing tshuva. And this thing, hidavar muchrachi. Look at the Rebbe's words. You must know the blemish you did. Now you have to understand what and the Rebbe's davar muchrachi. You have to. Now this is an important point because sometimes you say, I can't face it. It's too painful. It's true that if it's too painful and you're not ready to face it, you might have to push it off till when you're more ready. But however, there's a point you have to face it. And if you don't face it, it's going to come back to haunt you. Not maybe, it will. Not today, in a month. If not in a month, in a year. And if not you, come back to your kids. Yes, Hillel.
It seems to me that there are certain areas that you can't really know what the pagam is. You can know that there's damage, you know that there are usher, but how do you know really what the pagam is?
Right. So he doesn't mean here, Hillel.
Affecting the spiritual world.
Right, Hillel. He's not talking about that. That you're right. He means you committed an aveira. You didn't keep Shabbat, you didn't keep Shabbos. You spoke Lashon Hara, you spoke Lashon Hara. We're not talking about what chord in the Eitz Chaim did you blemish. That's not That's a by the way, if you learn Kabbalah and you're well versed, you could even figure some of that out. But that's definitely not the mahalach of the Baal Shem Tov.
Okay. Except
maybe Zidichoiv and Kamarna, but the B'derech Klal, most Hasidic groups never went into that thing. And you see from the Balatanya's Siddur, right? Well, the Siddur Shabbalon, the Siddur Ashash, and the Siddurim that he used to make his Siddur, but he took out the Yud Kei Vav Kei, the Nikud, the Nekudos, only on Yom Kippur. If you follow in the Chabad Machzer at night, it says we should say 4 kapitel Tilim before we go to sleep, Keneged Smal, right? And that has to do with the Yud Kei Vav Kei. And if you look there, you'll see how the Yud Kei Vav Kei is made over there. That's an exception. And it's an exception because we have to get rid of it. So there, for example, Hillel, it tells you what the sin is, omission of seed, right? And it tells you what you should do to be... That's right. So that's an exception, Or another thing, Yaakov, another thing in the Chabad Siddur, I don't know if you have it in other Siddurim, maybe you have it, but I don't think you do it. There, before we go to sleep, before we say Hamapil, we say the Hiratzin of each of the Hashem's Yud Kei Vav Kei, Keneged Misa, Shkila, Sleifa, Chenek, the 4 Misos. So there too, it tells you, whether we understand, it tells you that this pigam of tefillin is connected this letter of the Shem Hashem. But I don't believe that's what he's really getting at here. This is not, he's speaking to every one of us. Let's go further. I'm sorry, what?
That idiom you just mentioned is a new idiom for me. I didn't know that.
You have a Chabad Siddur Yaakov at home?
No.
Oh, okay. So somehow, if you get one or find one online, you'll see it. Before Hamapil, there's the Yehi Ratzon. A lot of people do that, say that once a month before Rosh Chodesh when they make a Cheshbon HaNefesh. But in our Siddur, it's brought down each night. Okay. As a boy, I didn't say it. As a teenager, I don't know. I wasn't trained to say it, but later on we did. Okay. In addition to knowing, Hillel asked the question, how do you know? Learn Torah. Befrotis ha-mitzvah. Know the details of the mitzvah. Hahi. V'limudahu kalev nishba v'nidge. In other words, who believed nishba v'nidge. When you know the details of tefillin, the koitze shel yud, the mabarta, the straps, the black, then you have to be put on tefillin in the morning. Was I careful about all the details? People sometimes allow their tefillin straps to go onto the floor. If you look at the Tanya Peidik Ches, chapter 8, the Alter Rebbe brings from Gemara, which implies you shouldn't do that. Other people are callous about it. Okay, whatever. If they have is it a sin technically? Maybe not, but definitely spirit, it shouldn't be that way. Yes, Hillel.
The old Tolder Rebbe Yochanan Tversky, once somebody's tefillin fell on the floor in Eretz Yisrael, and he said, in Eretz Yisrael, it's not because the land is holy. It's not a Yerida for the tefillin to touch the earth.
And only a Rebbe can say that. That's what and Baruch Hashem that he's such a tzaddik that he could say it and b'chula, but without that it is an issue. Or people have their tzitzis dragging on the floor. I'm just saying, the more you learn the pratim, look, that's what the Rebbe is saying here. We have to look at the words, what the Rebbe is, beprati is a mitzvah. Not just the overall mitzvahs. I put on tefillin, I put on a talis, and I put on tzitzis. No, the details of the mitzvahs. And the more you know, the more then you're cognizant of the way it should be. And if you didn't do those diyukim, you need to do tshuva. And he says, you're broken belev nishva v'nidke, which is interesting. I put on tefillin this morning. I should be broken. But if my 4 corners were not ribua, you should be brokenhearted if they weren't ribua. And maybe you weren't yaitza. And even if you were yaitza, why do you have to rely on a suffix, on a doubt? You understand? That's the attitude. Hinei is bizehu mamshich Torah. And when you do learn the details of the mitzvah, through learning about it, you draw down the light of Torah. The halacha zu she'over aleh v'nitzorach ladas as dvar ha'aveda. He goes back to his point. He's not giving up. This halacha that you desecrated, you have to know that dvar ha'aveda should ovar etzeni yisbarich. Now you understand, the Rebbe's talking to us. You know, you're not going out to the street in Wyoming and the guy doesn't know from an olive and a bays and telling him, you know, the guy's not putting on tefillin. So what are you telling me? His tefillin aren't square. He didn't put, you know what I'm saying? The Rebbe's talking to people who are learning, but obviously they didn't learn either the right information or enough, and for that they desecrated the mitzvah in certain details. So the Rebbe says for that they have to know what they did wrong in order for it to have a tikkun. Hein shehu beheder ki mitzvah say, and then the Rebbe says sometimes, good morning Moshe, good Yom Tov. Sometimes the lack of knowledge actually means you didn't do a mitzvah. I'll give you an example. What if someone gave their tefillin to a sefer and mistakenly the sefer gave him back and the person mixed up the Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam? If you put Rabbeinu Tams on with davening, have you done the mitzvah of tefillin? One thing's for sure I can tell you, it's a big shaila, okay? No, it's not your fault, and maybe it's not the sefer's fault, whoever mixed it up. Why do I choose this? Not because Moshe is a sefer, because I have tefillin, and my wife's cousin, who's a sefer, checked my tefillin, and he tells me my Rashi tefillin Alter Rebbe Ksav. And as far as I remember, I did not buy Alter Rebbe's Ksav. I lost my tefillin once in Costa Rica when I went to visit my uncle about 25 years ago. I left them in a taxi, and I never saw them again. So I had to buy tefillin. But knowing myself, I don't think at that time I bought Alter Rebbe's Ksav because it's triple the price, and the Rebbe, they say, did not, I don't know, I shouldn't say that, I want to say that. Some say he did wear, some say he did encourage it to people, but at that time, it wasn't as a standard now as it is by Lubavitchers. So I probably got, yes.
You're saying that now it is the standard.
Now it's more the standard by bar mitzvah boys, their father will dish out the extra, it's a lot of money difference, and they will get the Alter Rebbe's Ksav.
The implication of that is that, you know, the community's more affluent now, so the standard could be raised.
You could conclude that, or you conclude it's like they're taking it on credit cards. I mean, yes, Moshe. Let's hear from the Sefer himself. Go ahead.
Forgive me for jumping in. So I just want to, can I just clarify?
Yes, please.
My research.
Please, it's your field. Go ahead.
From my research from a number of years already now. So the Alter Rebbe's Ksav is something that's it's not so simple, it's complicated. From my research, the Sofrim I've spoken to, the Rabbanim I've spoken to, it's important to, if a person wants Alter Rebbe's Ksav, they need to make sure they're getting it from someone really, really knows it. It's not so simple. It's complicated. It's not like the other ksavim, like the Beis Yosef for the Ashkenazim, the Arizal for Ashkenazim, and for Velish like Sfardim that have more background and general sources. The Alter Rebbe's Ksav is more of a niche, let's just put it that way, and it's important to get it from someone who has a Kabbalah and getting it from a very legitimate source. So that's number
Moshe,
one.
Can you just sort of expand, since we're on the subject, like where the Alter Rebbe was coming from, and what's the distinction of the Alter Rebbe's Ksav as opposed to the Ksav of the Arizal, etc.?
So, okay, let me do this. I don't want to. This may that question might require more time than we
Okay.
have at the moment.
All right,
It's
I'll
actually kind of.
I know where you're.
No, but Moshe, just answer him with one example. The chaf, right? The chaf.
Okay, so basically like this. Grab a safer, but basically the Alter Rebbe's Ksav is shaped differently. It is essentially a hybrid of a certain sense of all the Ksavim, probably more the Arizal, and the shapes are, the letters are obviously the same. It's the same general shape, but there are very specific nuances that are different. For example, this is a sefer called Osios Arav. It's written by Rav Moshe Weiner, who maybe Rabbi Dalvin knows him.
I do.
He's he's a Rav right in Ramot.
Yes.
In Ramot in Yerushalayim, and he's a brother of Rav Eliezer Weiner, who's the head shaliach in Beit Shemesh.
Yes.
And I've spoken to him on a few times for different things. And basically, the bottom line is that the Alter Rebbe's Ksav there are some significant differences, and the nuances are so subtle but so important that's why it's important that a person learns it from a very, very legitimate source.
Okay, so
Is there an idea in Chabad Hasidus that this is like a building on the Ksav of the Arizal, like the Baal Shem Tov is taking the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, like the Baal Shem Tov is taking the teachings of the Arizal and making it available in a new way. Is that an idea behind the Ksav?
Well, I'll try to answer you to the best of my ability, but basically, in a nutshell, I think the Alter Rebbe's Ksav is sort of just simply an extension. And Rabbi Dolphin, correct me if I'm wrong. An extension of the Alter Rebbe's gisha, his perspective on halacha. In other words, like bringing together the world of halacha and the world of Kabbalah. Okay, and my understanding is that is why the letters are the way that they are. Now, again, another time, if I had. I would make a quick sketch and to show you examples of differences between the letters. I myself have never learned the Alter Rebbe's Ksav. I want to. It's something sort of on that to-do list. I was very fortunate to learn the other Ksavim, but many years ago when I trained to become a sober, and I write them. But the Alter Rebbe's Ksav, because of just where I learned and where I was holding in life and everything, it didn't happen yet. But what I just want to add one other thing is that what Rabbi Dolphin was saying is that from my research, it makes sense, Rabbi Dolphin, what you're saying about many of what fathers want for their bar mitzvah boys. The people that I've spoken to, it seems here anyway, it seems that the world of, in terms of Hasidic Chabad is sort of split down the middle. About half take Arizal and half take the Alter Rebbe's Ksav.
Right.
That's my
Yeah.
But that also could have to do with a generational thing. It could be an age thing, and it also could be that today, as opposed to let's just say 25, certainly 50 years ago, today there's more sofrim who are probably writing the Alter Rebbe's Ksav.
Yeah, and in Eretz Yisrael, there's been a very vocal group of Bavitcher's knowledgeable Talmidei Chachamim that have come out, and this is what you're referring to, I believe, against the standard Alter Rebbe's Ksav, and they say it's not kosher. They say it's not kosher. And this has been a great uproar in the community. I know the names, but I won't mention them. And not that it's lashon hara. They feel halachically it's wrong. But I want in New York here, until this controversy, it was accepted the people that wrote Alter Rebbe's Ksav, Rabbi Zirkin, who was the Rebbe's Sefer, his student Rabbi Clapin, who lives in Crown Heights, and younger Sofran too. My nephew, my wife's cousin, he also writes the Alter Rebbe's Ksav. So I think here in New York, we have not gone the route of accepting the Yerushalmi dissenters from the Alter Rebbe's Ksav, and I believe, and that my comment was really about New York and America, that more and more bar mitzvah boys are wearing Alter Rebbe's Ksav. But anyway, going back to my thing is, I didn't have that, and to the Sefer, he checked my tefillin, and he says, oh, your Rashi's are Alter Rebbe's Ksav. I said, I didn't buy Alter Rebbe's Ksav. So he said, probably you gave it to a Sefer and he mixed it up. I don't know.
It's definitely possible. It's definitely possible. When I write, just to say, so what I do, and I learned this from the very, very beginning from the people that I learned Safras from, that when every pair of tefillin I write, everything that I write, whatever it is, I scan it. I have a copy of it in my computer. Now, for tefillin, I give every pair of tefillin that I write, I make a full-size set of photocopies of the entire ksav to the customer, to the client. And I explain to them that A, so they can look at it, but B, that if there's ever a situation where there's a question, if the parshas that they went to have the tefillin checked, and there's ever a question that the parshas that are in now are the parshas that I wrote for them, they have a photocopy and they can compare it immediately.
Right.
You know.
Right. So
most sofrim don't do that, but that's
right. I understand. Just as an aside, if you do get the time, Moshe, I think it would be a worthwhile financial investment to learn Alter Rebbe's Ksav, because Sofrim charge a lot for that. It's a specialty, and there's plenty of Lubavitchers still, even in Eretz Yisrael, that want that, and they're going to pay for it. So, you know, I tell Seifrim here, I tell Skver, I tell non-Lubavitchers, because a lot of Sofrim, you want to make Parnasa, learn the Alter Rebbe's Ksav, you will have business. Okay, I want to go back to the Maamar, because we're learning Chassidus now. So I just brought that as an example. Of doing a mitzvah and knowing what you're doing and being learned. And sometimes it's not even your fault, and something happens and it's not right. So therefore, the mitzvah is lacking. If Chas v'Sholom, you're putting on the Rabbeinu Tam's instead of Rashi's, that needs a good tikkun. It's not your fault, but the fact is, you didn't put Rashi's on for 10 years or 5 years or a year or a month. It's a serious issue. So the point being but here he's talking about Hillel Yoni intentional Avedis, and he says further, Leman what?
I'm sorry, forgive me. Can I just jump in just 30 seconds?
Yeah.
Just on that, if anybody ever has a question, looking at the Shel Yad, you can't tell from the outside if it's Rashi or Rabbeinu Tam. But just as a quick for everybody, if you take your Shel Rosh, you'll see on Rashi the little calf hairs that come out, okay? On the Rashi tefillin, they're towards the side. They're like on the first third, depending on which side you're looking at it, okay? But Rabbeinu Tam, those calf hairs, they always come out in the middle.
Right.
Okay, so that's, you can tell, if there's ever a question with Shel Rosh, Hillel, you'll take a look at yours, you'll see what I mean.
Yeah.
So I'm saying, you'll see the hairs coming out, they're right in the middle. Okay, that was just a quick,
thank you, Yashikoyach,
okay.
Very important, thank you. Then there's a time we do something, Hashem didn't tell us to do it, and we do it. You need to know the details. A third time in this chapter, he repeats the point. So you should know the great distance that you are from God by doing an Aveda. And for those that say Chabad doesn't have Musar, this is a piece of Musar right here, and it's in a Maamar of the Frierdiker Rebbe. So don't tell me there's no Musar. There's plenty of Musar here. V'goydel chas v'sholem ha'oynesh rachmon litzlan, and the greatness of the oynesh, of the punishment, God forbid, asher magia loy avur zeh. If you don't know what the punishment is, big deal. You have to know. And therefore the ways of correction that you need to correct. So he goes back to the word Aveira. Yaakov, what does the word Aveira mean? To desecrate. It means to pass over. La'avor. What are you passing over? You're passing over the mitzvah. Aveira heipich in mitzvah. The mitzvah utzafsa v'chibur. What is the word mitzvah associated with? Tzafta. It's an Aramaic word which means, Yoni, to connect, to join. Through mitzvahs, man is joined, is united with godliness. V'aveda. And what about Aveda? Hu meloshin ha'avara. He passes over. The oiver mirashus hakadusha. He's passing over from the domain of holiness l'rishus hasitra achra, to the domain of the negative side. You're taking a stroll when you're doing Aveda. Right, Yoni? You're supposed to be strolling in the holiness, and all of a sudden you take a left turn and you're in a foreign field. Asher al Kain,
on the side of the track.
That's right. Good. Well said. Asher al Kain tzorech ladas proti is goydel rechukay melikus v'lasei tshuva. You have to know in detail. Moshe, you see that Rebbe says it's not enough to know just a generality. Now I emphasize again, because the Rambam says about tshuva is not allowed to say, I'd love to eat this hamburger, this treif, but Hashem told me not to. Rambam Paskins, it's in the Rambam, Hilchos Tshuva, I believe, about the Tshuva, whoever, doesn't mean if it, anyone who's in that issue about the Tshuva, doesn't have the strength to say, test me. You're not allowed to say, test me. Here, this implication here, tzorach ladas proti is goydel rechukai, seems like it also includes test me. And what I'm telling you, it does not include that. Unless you're not about the shuva in that issue. So then if you're not about the shuva in that issue, and you have a strong backbone, and you're not going to be frazzled by looking at the tension and the Aveira, know what you did, and therefore you can do tshuva properly. Yesterday we said all these al-chaitz. I'm sitting there 10 times, right? Banging away over and over and over. Enough already. And that's not enough. You eat, then you eat, then you eat. Every day, eat, sleep. Do you ever say it's enough? No. Well, when it comes to an Aveda, you have to know the seriousness of the transgression. And guess what? You don't get it from one time. And you don't get it from 2 times. But if you have a whole day, 24, 26 hours, Yom Kippur, 25 hours, and you take time to reflect, and you say, I embarrassed my parents, I spoke Lashon Hara, I insulted people, and on and on and on, so finally something will sink in. And then you'll say to Hashem, please forgive me, I will not do this again, b'li neder. So that's what the Rebbe says here. And the Chazal say, great is tshuva, which brings cure to the world. Take, for example, a person who is ailing, he's sick, he's hurting in one of his limbs. You have to know what's the reason. Sometimes it's because the limb is damaged. Sometimes it's because the energy coming from the soul is not reaching properly the limb. I can tell you myself, I'm having these spasms in my fingers. Right? Is it coming because it's an arthritis, it's the fingers, or is it coming from something else? Just saying. You have to know if it's the oil. What? Thank you. Baruch Hashem, it's not terrible and we'll get over it. But the point is, in every part, a person has to look, is it the keli, the aver, or is it the or? Is it the energy coming from the nefesh that's not reaching its place? Or is there damage in the keli and how do I fix it? Ulupamim hu dis galus achayis manefesh eine bam shocha toiva umezebo akev. And he says sometimes it's actually because the energy from the soul is not being transmitted properly, and that's why you have the pain. So by eating and drinking, it won't cure you. Because you got to cure the nefesh. You got to cure the soul. Next page, 40. You make a trufa, like a medicine in healing. Through making a powerful samim, no? Like incense, medicine.
No, medicine.
Medicine, misrape. But how does he explain? Look what he says. The new medicine doesn't come to cure the damaged limb. It comes to draw new energy from the nefesh. I will stop here. But that will continue tomorrow. But that's his point, that the Gemara says, there's a Gemara, it's a very important Gemara. Tshuva mevi refuah la'olam. Tshuva brings healing to the world. That's kipshutai. It's not just a fantasy. And we'll see tomorrow how he develops his point. Everyone have a great day. And today is the Yud of the Shem Hashem, the Yom Tiv. We should live with the Yud, and tomorrow we'll live with the Vav. Sei gesund.
The Vav or the Hay?
The Hay, sorry. Thank you. Yeah. Tomorrow is the first Hay, and then the Vav, and then thank you, Hillel. Sei gesund.